UnHerd Club. It's lovely to see you all for this autumn season. It feels a bit strange to call it autumn given the weather, but this is our new programme of events because we work in academic years, as everybody of course should. So as we exit Brat Summer and enter into Oasis Autumn, or whatever we're going to call the new season, we've got a lovely way to start. You no doubt know the person sat next to me, but he is the author of many, many best-selling books, including the novel Geoff in Venice, Death in Varanasi, a book about jazz, a book about the First World War, a book about travel and yoga, a book about D.H. Lawrence, a book about photography, a book about a Tarkovsky film. I mean, really, the list goes on, and it's as varied and interesting as you could possibly hope for. He is, of course, Geoff Dyer, and we are absolutely thrilled to have him in the building tonight. Please welcome him to the UnHerd Club.
Okay, thank you.
Just a little bit of housekeeping. I know it's very boring, and I'll get over it very quickly. We will talk for about 45 minutes now, and then we will, as we always do, take a little 10-minute break so that you can all lubricate yourselves in the bar just behind you. You're obviously free to do that at any point during the evening, should you wish. But there will be a moment there to stop and pause before we have an audience Q&A in the second half. So we'll take a little moment of pause there after we've had this main conversation. I met Geoff 5 years ago, maybe a little more for the first and only time prior to this, when I went into his very lovely flat to record a podcast. He asked me to take my shoes off when I first entered, which I remember very vividly, and then made a very kind of elaborate tea ceremony.
Well, bollocks, it wasn't a ceremony.
It was pretty elaborate. The most elaborate tea ceremony I've ever been offered.
Well, I warmed the pot, that was all.
OK, there we go. I sensed that this might tell us something about Geoff before we begin, so I just wanted to begin by asking, do you live by ritual? Are there rituals that you enact every day? Or was that just a freak occurrence that when I came to your house, I was asked to remove my shoes and then to witness a kind of Japanese-level tea ceremony?
Well, OK, well, I think I've cleared up one part of that. But yeah, I mean, the shoes off is kind of just, yeah, that's just, it seems horrible to wear shoes in a domestic setting. But, I mean, in terms of rituals, no, I don't think there are any that I have. And I know certain writers have to go through this thing of, you know, this has to be done, that has to be done, or they're fetishistic about using those Moleskine notebooks or whatever it is.
Particular stationery and all the
rest. Yeah. I'm sponsored by Staples.
You're like a low league football team.
I mean, yeah, not sponsored because I buy these. I mean, I really, no, I don't have any of that, you know, it's, and I'm very conscious that some of the least productive writers I know are the most highly addicted to their rituals, that everything's got to be in place. Whereas for me, I mean, I took against Moleskine notebooks because Bruce Chatwin used them, and I've always had a low opinion of his stuff. And I just don't, I mean, I think I mean, it's always been the case for me that all I need for writing is, well, a table and a chair, and increasingly, I guess, my laptop. But nothing else is, I don't need anything else. Oh, except for a good night's sleep and probably several naps in the course of the day, but no rituals, no.
Many Q&As when you are faced with an audience will start with a question about how close the Geoff who writes in your books is to the Geoff who sat on the stage. There is often this question about how much is fiction and how much is non-fiction, which feels like a strange distillation, considering how genre-defying your work is. When you sit down to write, do you intend to put yourself as much as possible in the writing, or is it, in fact, that just happens?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, so sometimes this long-limbed, lanky person is there, often for comic effect. And I guess yeah, I guess physically the narrators always bear a close resemblance to me. I mean, so there's that, and that's just there. Other time in the fiction, there's I'm sort of bits of sort of other things going on. But I think what I'm much more interested in now, or rather, what I'm much more aware of now, is this thing of, okay, there is. Okay, I can make these sort of often slapstick or comic appearances in the book, but I'm much more aware of this idea of me being there as a consciousness, really. So that, and this is particularly, I think, interesting with regard to non-fiction, because I'm trying to think of a book I read recently, a great book, Volume 2 of Rick Atkinson's Liberation trilogy. His 3 books, about 800 pages each. The first one is the North Africa campaign in the Second World War. Second is Sicily and Italy, and the third is from D-Day onwards to the German surrender. And it's an amazing achievement. It's so researched, all this kind of stuff. And he's a very, very good writer. But I'm not sure that we're getting much. We're getting a great sense of what Rick Atkinson knows, and he's got a great mastery of narrative. But I don't think there's much of the Rick Atkinson consciousness. Then it seems to me there's another kind of non-fiction book where, okay, there is the subject matter, and so in my case, you've listed some of the subjects I've addressed. But at least as important as the subject matter is the consciousness of the author. And always when I'm writing a book, I mean, so many books could, in a sense, be written by anyone who had a certain level of knowledge, and stylistically, it's sort of interchangeable, really. Whereas for me, I mean, I feel that I do this thing, it's happened every time with every book I've written. I've always had to write a note to myself as a thing of reassurance, saying, remember, write the book only you could write. And so what you're getting in my books, and what gets up some people's noses is, that consciousness, which some people find intrusive or irritating. But it's something that I have a great fondness for in other books as well. So that if you think of, a writer who's meant so much to me, someone like, Annie Dillard, say, okay, you could list the subjects that her books are about, but really the overwhelming thing is that consciousness of Annie Dillard's, which is a combination of what she knows, her intellect, and the peculiarities and vagaries of her nature. And I guess the sort of supreme example of that, which is a book I've probably blurred on about too much, would be Rebecca West's Black Lamb, Grey Falcon. There it is, 1,200-page history of her of Yugoslavia. So it's about Yugoslavia, yeah. But, it's about that titanic, huge brain of hers. Yeah.
In many ways, any introduction to your work is doing it a disservice, because I list there what might be a kind of ChatGPT series of themes. But of course, if you say it's, Out of Sheer Rage is a book about D.H. Lawrence, that would not at all cover it. In many ways, it's a book about the idea of living in the shadow of someone else, of the rage and peculiarity of being creative. All of those things kind of come into it, and your own tussle between trying to write a novel and writing a book about Lawrence himself. There is this question, I suppose, in the contemporary moment about how unique any piece of art is. ChatGPT, which I just mentioned, has caused a lot of hand-wringing by writers who are concerned that it would replace writing, to which I often think, well, if you are concerned that ChatGPT could replace you, then maybe you need to think more about your own writing than ChatGPT. Do you think that we have entered into a time in which people are more taking blueprints and working with them than defying or pushing boundaries that previous generations of writers seem to be working towards?
Yeah, I suppose the short answer to that is I don't know. But what I what I could say is something about the importance of blueprints for me, or templates, because I think for various reasons, in terms of the novels I've written, I've often had a prior novel in mind as a sort of foundation on which I would build my own, if you like. And I'm conscious of George Steiner's line where he says, implicit in the deep reading of any text is the desire to write one in reply. So I'm thinking my book, Paris Trance, I really set out intending there to write a version of Scott Fitzgerald's Tender is the Night. I mean, to the extent that exactly as is the case with Zadie Smith's On Beauty, which has the same opening lines as whichever E.M. Forster book it is, that book of mine begins and ends with the same first and last lines as Tender is the Night. So I like this idea of, a sort of template, if you like, or the traces of an earlier novel. And of course, Geoff in Venice, Death in Varanasi is completely a version mainly of Death in Venice, but also with traces of Henry James's The Aspen Papers.
So you don't have a kind of natural allergy. There is no natural rejection of a kind of plagiaristic or shadowing of things that have come before.
Oh yeah, no, definitely not. And in fact, in the afterword to when I was younger and sort of trying to be hip, I listed not the quotations that I'd taken from from Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. I didn't say this book contains quotations from The Sun Also Rises. I said this book contains samples from. How cool is that?
Do you find it irritating when people refer to your writing as creative non-fiction, this new category that has emerged?
Yeah. No, not really. But I would say that there's so much stress on creative non-fiction in America, and for the most part, I like to read perhaps what might be called non-creative non-fiction, such as Rick Atkinson's. And the thing with creative non-fiction, the way it's gone now, and I teach at the University of Southern California. And, I promise you, if you ask any of the graduate students what they're working on, none of them are writing a boring old novel. They're all doing hybrid work and, genre-defying stuff. And I guess I was hired partly because I'm associated with that myself.
You're profiting off the new kind of obsession with autofiction and that sort of stuff?
Well, I don't know if I'm profiting from it. I think I was one of the people that, was sort of doing it. Anyway, so the irony is, of course, that then it turns, so they got me to do this. And then they've hired this, the person who turns out to have a rather tweedier conception of what writing I encourage in. I think that's this hybrid thing is what's happened. I mean, it really has become an established category. The category-defying novel has become such a recognizable, such an easily categorized thing, and it's a sort of line I've used before, but the software for that kind of book is now available for free download.
Mm-hmm. What would be the most radical thing if a student came to you and said, "This is what I'm doing"? If the kind of category-defying creative non-fiction is the thing that most of them say that they are doing, what would be the most surprising to you?
If they were writing, if they said, I'm probably, the most surprising thing would be, and it would be surprising because it's so difficult, is if they said they were writing Middlemarch or its equivalent, because
a narrative.
Yeah, big old,
roman.
Yeah, or to give a contemporary example, Jonathan Franzen's The Corrections. Nobody's writing that, and one of the reasons they're not writing it is because it's so much work. Mm-hmm. And I guess also, it's another way in which I was having this argument with a friend the other day. I've come round increasingly to this kind of thing of the mystery of great fiction writing. Now, of course, there are these exceptional things like Ulysses by Joyce, which frankly I couldn't bear to go near again. But the mystery of just great, straightforward fiction writing, let's say what in Pilates they call the core, that really hasn't changed much since Jane Austen, really.
There is these courses that are designed to create the kind of writers of the future have geared themselves more towards, I'm not blaming you for this, geared towards that creative non-fiction or auto-fiction, the idea that you should write what you know, which is the mantra, I think, of the contemporary fiction moment.
Yeah.
Where do we find those works of pure imagination or something that perhaps is more anarchic?
Yeah. Oh well, no. I mean, I would say in a way it's less anarchic. I mean, it's very
more conservative.
yeah. So I mean, sorry. Again, I'm aware that I'm sort of beating a familiar drum, but I keep coming back to really the first 70 pages of Tessa Hadley's Clever Girl, and I'm always saying to my graduate students, this is embedded in those 70 pages is the secret of all great writing. There it is. So that's the easy thing, that's an easy thing to do. They go away and read that. And the weird thing, and she's you couldn't get a more traditional writer in a way. And I feel the same about the new Alan Hollinghurst book that I'm reading, Our Evenings. But there's still and there's nothing spectacular. I mean, Tessa's writing is all so domestic, it's England, small scale, but how you manage to do that, how you distill, how you get that Rosetta Stone information out of it will remain a mystery till the end of time. And some people can do it. Some young American writers, somebody like, let's say, Emma Cline can do it in her very, very sort of cool, contemporary way. And it's a mystery. Or just think of there's loads of people, but let's say somebody whose reputation I think has suffered to an extent because of the ease with which she does it is Anne Tyler. You don't get the sense that it's really causing her any sleepless nights. She gets up and just writes, I don't know how many thousand words a day it is, but there it is, this fully realised world.
It's quite extraordinary when you sense that you're witnessing, or in the case of reading a novel, you're feeling the work of someone where it's poured out of them. And that can be applied to many things. You write about music, and you also write about sports, which have this in common, the moment that an individual displays this mysterious talent, which of course can be put down to a certain degree of practice and genetics, but there is some magic formula here. Yeah, well, the sport I think is a slightly misleading thing because, my God, you really have to work at it. And it's, I don't know about if the rest of you spent as much time as Rebecca, my wife, and I did watching the Olympics. I mean, what a happy phase of our lives that was when you just knew what you were going to do. It's a shame it doesn't happen every year. I mean, really, it was so great. And so particularly if you watch something which is really, really beyond belief, the gymnastics, both women's gymnastics and men's are very different, but they're both beyond belief. And, it's just, we were just gasping and oohing and aahing the neighbours must have thought we were having sex or something when we were watching this. And, but what I loved about it more than anything, I don't know if we were watching it on the BBC, the commentary, I don't know the people's names, there was a northern guy. So he's talking about this thing which is at the sublime heights of human achievement. And you'd always say, oh, that's good work. Oh, that's good work. So this gravity-defying stuff was so down to earth. And I liked the idea that after doing something which, after Simone Biles would do something which completely blew everybody's mind, which had never been done before, it was like, she's put a good shift in. Yeah. So I think that might be more about the northern condition than it is about the Olympics, actually. I like that. I find that very, very, very appealing indeed. But I don't think you need that degree
of rigor in your training as a writer, because the distinction between sort of practicing and doing it writing's different to, say, musicians, where you have to learn the scales, whereas writing, you know, how do you do writing? Well, you read a lot, but then it's not like most writers don't spend their time doing exercises, warming up, doing the sort of the equivalent of the scales, or just start your floor session by doing, a straightforward, boring old somersault.
I think so. I mean, some do, but I think perhaps their work comes off as slightly laboratory made. There is a certain. You find lots of graduates of creative writing programs have done these almost sport-like exercises, and then their work becomes incredibly formulaic. Yeah,
but I think what makes the Olympics so fascinating, especially things like a race is different, but with these routines, you do it 1,000 times, 10,000 times in training, and you've got it perfected. And then, a bit like Max Whitlock on the pommel horse, on the day, 4 years ago, he did it absolutely perfectly. Then this time he sort of brushed his ankle against one of the pommels, and that threw him off for the whole thing.
There's something kind of almost cruel, I find. I find it too painful to watch, even the Olympics, I think, because you know that many of these people have broken kind of world records and in private, and that the idea, the difference between a private show of strength or speed then is brought onto a public stage and can just entirely crush that person in an instant is too much for me to bear, I think.
Oh, well, I find it so exciting, and it's, and then, I mean, we don't want to dwell on this too much, but, everyone knows how fast they can run in a race. And, so all you've got to do is run as fast as you can. But as the commentators bring out, the race itself ushers in a whole load of variables, doesn't it? So your ability to run fast is, of course, very, very important, but it's not all determining. So things can go completely haywire in the race, as happened when, in the 400 metres hurdles, the women's, when Femke Bol, who I'm so in love with, when she was in tears afterwards because she didn't know why she'd got why it had all gone so wrong for her.
That's extraordinary moments as well, of the kind of complete opposite of what we usually associate with the Olympics, which is this kind of high achievement, which are these moments of downfall that are quickly skirted over, of course. But when you see them, it is the exact flip of the coin emotionally, where it is almost the same emotion, the same amount of intensity as comes with standing on the podium, comes with the failure as well. Well,
exactly. But I mean, the real beauty of actually, there's another bit though of the Olympics that I really liked this year. It was with, do you remember? I think it was during some big sporting event a little while ago. The two high jumpers decided to share the gold, the guy from Brunei and the guy from wherever he's from. Anyway, so this year's high jump, if you remember, in the final, two guys were completely tied, and instead of saying let's share the gold, they both said fuck it, no, let's just go at it, let's see who's the biggest man. And so they kept raising the bar, and then neither of them could get over that. So so then the high jump became the opposite of a high jump. It became the low jump. They started lowering the bar. And the thing is, by this stage, they were both so knackered that they couldn't get over anything. So it just became this really quite sort of pathetic kind of thing. And then one of them did eventually manage to get over it, and he sort of won. But it was a very weird way to go.
Strange Sisyphus moment.
But the greatest thing about the Olympics, and the key thing, what it exists for, is to generate. I mean, the purpose of sport is to generate moments of sportsmanship. And what I love about it is that it does that in a way that, even though I spend a lot of my time watching football, but I can't bear it because they're all such utter cheats. Every single footballer is a cheat, whereas the spirit of Oh, just, yes, sportsmanship is so great, especially in the men's decathlon and the women's heptathlon when they all join hands at the end. Oh, it always makes me cry. I love it so much.
It's nice. It's a very kind of rosy view of the Olympics. I myself kind of watch it, have a slight repulsion at the Nietzschean, and you've written about Roger Federer and Nietzsche in the recent book, so there's a kind of interesting crossover here about the slightly fascistic nature of the Olympics, about the idea of the kind of Übermensch or the man in perfect form. And I don't know, maybe it's simply because I was never picked for sports teams when I was at school, but I do have, there is a slightly knee-jerk reaction I have to it. Do you link in any way a kind of idea of the perfected human and sport in the way in which, you know, we all know that football was used by Mussolini to spread propaganda in Italy. It's always been a vehicle for propaganda by fascistic leaders. Why is that? And is there anything to that knee-jerk reaction I have?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, certainly with the mention of sort of, you know, the Nazi Olympics. I mean, I think we all felt watching that. You know, we all love France and think it's so cool, but I mean, I'm going to use a word now which you don't hear very often these days, but it was so naff, the opening ceremony. And I think we all felt, God, we could have used a bit more Leni Riefenstahl there, you know.
Well, if you've ever been to a French cultural festival, you realise all of your ideas from the outside of French culture are completely wrong, and they are deeply naff. Naff in everything they do.
But then the great thing is that all faded away once we got to the primal thing of the sports. I don't know. I guess my answer to that is I don't know. But I mean, the flip side of that, which I find as sort of irritating in a way, is this constant kind of thing of, oh, how sport brings us together. And
the Gary Lineker effect.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, I'm not going to. I mean, I love Gary Lineker. I think, you know, it's, I mean, I don't know who I love more, Gabby Logan or Gary Lineker, but this idea of the kind of sport bringing people together, and you just look at the kind of level of kind of behaviour of you know, the crowds at a football match, you know, and it's really, I mean, it's just, I find that somewhat of a cliche.
I mean, tennis, of course, does not quite have this same tradition. What is it about Roger Federer as a tennis player that appeals to you so much? Yeah,
I mean, it's you know, yeah, I mean, there was this the Federer book ends with me saying, oh, God, it's great. I'm not missing Roger, because I had this, like many people, I fell in love with Emma Raducanu briefly, but then...
It's been quite disappointing, hasn't she?
Well, the poor thing, she's got all these injuries because she's been crushed by the weight of all the sponsorship on her young limbs, you know.
It's like you with Staples, you know, you're going to get tennis elbow.
But yeah, so I've never recovered really from Roger's retiring, and of course then, and I think that, well, I still miss him somewhat, but that dreadful film that came out recently, the Asif Kapadia thing, I mean, that was just so, that was the worst side of Roger, you know, it was all just his incredible ability to monetize our love for him. But I still love him and miss him.
Do you feel used when you see something
I mean,
like
it's
that?
just so, it was just so crap. But I think what the thing is with Roger, we will never see tennis played as beautifully as that again. And it's funny, you know, you ask if I have rituals. Well, I don't have rituals to get me going, but I have multiple ways of wasting my time. And one of them is watching this ever-replenishing supply of, you know, 20 minutes of Roger's best this and that. And my hunger for that is weirdly undiminished.
Have you met him?
No, never. But I always believed that we could be friends because it's very obvious to me that he has a great sense of humour. And, you know, this is... A sense of humour is something so, it's more than a sense of humour, it's something so deep in somebody's relation to the world, and he has that. So if we could just be
get you into a room
introduced, then
together.
we could, once we started like just a bit of back and forth thing,
A bit of banter and you'd
yeah,
be
and we would, yeah.
bosom buddies.
I really believe that.
Yeah, I think
I
so.
mean, the only contact we had with, you know, it's not unusual. I felt like I was turning into Tom Jones as I said that. You can ask very successful writers to blurb your book. So you can ask, let's say, who's a very successful, well-paid writer, Salman Rushdie, let's say. You can ask him for a blurb, and if he likes your book, he'll provide it for you, you know. So my agent, who's a well-known agent, got in touch with Roger's agent to say, here's this book, you know, how about an endorsement? An endorsement with Roger Federer and his agent, whereas Rushdie will do it for free, an endorsement from Roger of any kind starts at about 150 grand, you know. So that seemed quite a lot to even think of paying for a sort of a line saying, you know, it wouldn't even involved any work. I even fed the endorsement to him because he's got a sense of humor. I said to my agent, say, this is what, you know, I thought it would have been more about me, Roger Federer. I thought that would have been a great
joke.
Yeah, you know, but no, negotiations broke down at an early stage. We were like Mick Lynch, you know.
Did you lowball him at all? Give him like a
There was no
25 quid in a dinner or something?
There was just nothing to be.
It's a real shame. Well, speaking of Salman Rushdie, actually, while we're here, I might as well ask this now. The Royal Society of Literature has come into some trouble recently,
Yes.
and Salman Rushdie has been speaking about them quite publicly and about their lack of support for him after the attempt on his life. I just wondered, as a kind of long-standing member, how you feel about that situation.
We're not going to go into that because I did get briefly involved in it, and after a very short while, I wished I hadn't.
It's always a good. It's always a good
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. It was like so many things, it quickly turned into a right old can of worms. Yeah.
Did you speak publicly about it, or?
Well, I signed a letter, and then as
Open
so
letters
often,
are a tricky thing.
anyway, it was just really, it turned into something else. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about Trump, because you wrote an interesting
Wow.
piece in the New Statesman about the assassination attempt on him, and the photograph particularly, and the way in which it sat in a kind of history of images. What is it about Trump, do you think, now that in that essay, it was prior to Biden stepping down, Kamala Harris kind of taking to the floor, but what is it about Trump that makes him such a imaginable subject? He feels like he is the kind of prime image of American politics of the last perhaps 100 years, and he seems to stand for something. He's got a kind of signification to him that feels like it's going to go on for potentially hundreds of years more. So what is it about him that is so fascinating?
I don't get it. Like, you know, I'm English, and like every English person, I just cannot understand it. It's just, you know.
But you live in America. You have lived in America. Or spent a lot of time in America.
Yeah, I've been in America now for 10 years. I've got an American passport now. I can vote in the election. Haven't made up my mind who I'm voting for yet. But yeah, it's so extraordinary. One of the striking things when you're in America is if you use the word yob, you talk about yobs. No one in America knows what a yob is. So in a way, yobs don't exist in America. So people then say, what's a yob? And you kind of think, well, it's not a redneck. It's a uniquely British thing in a way. And then you might say, well, this is all very topical. You might say, think of Liam Gallagher. He's a yob, you know. And then people, then a little sort of, they get a sense of it, you know.
Do you think Trump's a yob? Is that what you're...
No, not at all. No. What I was going to say is that when you're in these places that are big Trump supporters, you know, even the kind of people who were involved in storming the Capitol, if you were in a place where they where one of those places where they live, and I've been to some of these places, people are sort of nice and polite in a weird way. And, and then just this kind of strange thing of voting for somebody who has such contempt for them, doesn't have their interests at heart at all. It just doesn't make sense to me. I just don't get it at all.
There's many such cases of that, I suppose, in this country and many countries around the world.
Yeah, it's a mystery to me. And then also it's just so weird, the incessant boasting of it. I mean, even the crudest rapper doesn't boast to that degree, and boasting is never an appealing quality, but Trump's constant boasting about himself, it's just extraordinary how people who, in America, I don't know, my experience is that the basic level of politeness and good manners in America, even in really quite rough places, is sort of very, very high. And this person who is so at odds with anyway, what am I saying?
But
he's just a mystery.
He's got a perhaps slightly Nietzschean conception of the idea of peak performance, which is this, he's got this quite extraordinary concept where you have a finite amount of energy across your life. And can use it in these bursts. And so I think he maybe perhaps taps into something that does link up to these sports people. And
I see, yeah, but we've got to be a little bit cautious with this rather promiscuous use of the word Nietzschean or stuff, which I've noticed twice now. So for example, Trump's obsession with ratings, which is ratings and wealth, his only metric for. Bear in mind, one of Nietzsche's many endearing qualities was that he was such a total loser. It was just incredible that it was a source of constant astonishment to him that even though he thought Zarathustra was the greatest gift that had ever been given to mankind, he was really quite amazed that only about 400 people wanted this great gift, So he was. Then that had an effect on him, of course, because he was feeling he was doing something great. The fact that nobody wanted it or was interested in it made him feel, okay, what I'm doing now is actually so far in advance of what anyone can appreciate that unpopularity is proof of its importance. So it's the exact opposite of Trump's ratings mania in a way, and the other thing I should have perhaps said earlier when you were talking about the Übermensch, bear in mind that for Nietzsche that the Übermensch, the overman, is somebody who has overcome himself,
Yeah, as distinct to the last man or the kind of man in the herd.
Right, yes, exactly. And then, we can get into all sorts. So it's about self-overcoming. And then this is a rather crude joke that, I know I'm not going to make a crude joke.
I can make a crude joke.
No, we're going to move on.
How do you think herd mentality works then in American politics? Because it feels that we, obviously here at UnHerd, part of the reason why we're here is to push against herd mentality. How has herd mentality been a part of the story of America over the last 20 years?
20 years, I don't know. Well, recently, I'm certainly aware, teaching at a university in California, of a particular kind of sort of herd mentality that's taken over there.
In the academics?
In a university. I don't know about in academic work, but all the kind of issues that you would expect. So I've not really had any trouble at my university, even though I'm aware that trouble can come knocking at your door at any time. And I nearly got into trouble with, there's a lot of people there's all sorts of authors you can. Anyway, so one year I really, I assigned this book by, it was Naipaul's An Area of Darkness, his first fantastic book about India. And anyway, there started to be quite a lot of trouble from the undergraduates about this. And then, I was aware of stuff starting to, I had a snitch in the class, a student who rather liked me, and he said, there's a mutiny on the cards, and they're trying to get. So then I called my friend at another university. He said, you've got to watch this. Once this stuff happens, you really are bound to lose it. Then I called an Indian friend and asked for his advice, and he said, in his Indian accent, he said, "Oh my God, what are you doing teaching Naipaul? Have you got a cancellation death wish?" Naipaul, who has won a Nobel Prize, whatever you think of him, he's
honoured by Royal Society of Literature.
And anyway, it turned out rather fortuitously. So this mutiny got going, and then it got mixed in with another thing that in another class, I'd linked Dennis Johnson to, the great recently deceased American writer. I said he comes out of a tradition you can trace back to, Jim Morrison and the Beats, and back to Blake, all this kind of stuff. Anyway, and then the kid who'd been leading the rebellion, I thought he was going to get me on sort of being a kind of, I should say also, all these white kids, they hadn't been to India, so they were,
naturally.
So anyway, and then it turned out, so he was leading, and then he dropped out of the class, and he sent me this note saying, "Dear Geoff," and they're not allowed, they should call me Professor Dyer. He said, "You are everything that Jim Morrison and the Beats would despise. Toodaloo." And he dropped the class, and then it turned out this mutiny, which could have been about Naipaul as a sort of weirdly dark-complexioned white supremacist. It turned out their real objection was they thought I was too uptight about punctuation. And at that moment, a huge weight was lifted from my shoulder, because I realised that I could never get convicted or on that score. So it was all great. Yeah. Once again, the Beats came to my rescue in a weird way. Yeah.
Do you sense that there's been a shift in the atmosphere that writers are working in, though, in the present day? Because, of course, I first met you with Tom Hodgkinson, who's here, from The Idler, editor of The Idler magazine, who started The Idler magazine while on the dole. You've written about being on the dole and writing. That's not a reality for writers now, in contemporary Britain at least. Does that mean people are taking less risks, or how has it changed?
Well, I think this, these issues about, if you think of a book like But Beautiful, the jazz book that came out in 1991, there it is, a book about an English guy. Well, I think now you might have some pause to do that. But I think all sorts of things going on in the culture at large can inhibit you in a way that, even though you might be signing a thing to appear in the Royal Society of Literature saying the writer must be free to blah, 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 do anything, there's a subtler psychological thing of inhibition. And, that's obviously bad to be resisted. And I think several things are going on. If you're really unrepentant, if you're a real badass, such as Michel Houellebecq, or, who's, it's so unacceptable in polite society.
He's paid the price, I think.
I mean, he's sort of paid the price and reaped he's never going to, you could never cancel Houellebecq.
No, he's uncancelable. He's like Kanye West. He's completely uncancelable.
Yeah, well, Kanye West is sort of different. But anyway, a poet that I absolutely love, Frederick Seidel, who is, God, how old is that guy now? He's really getting on a bit. But he is a source of joy to me, because he's so, what he's saying is, in a sense, so completely beyond beyond the pale of this bland idea of what's acceptable. Okay, so you could say that's a recent thing, but then we go back to the 1980s, when I published that Dole novel, The Colour of Memory. There's a lot of romance there, there's a lot of drug taking and stuff, and there's this kind of sex scene in it, and it culminates in a kiss. Because at that stage, there was so much of this stuff that's happening now, these students think it's happening for the first time, but I've lived through, I don't know how many culture wars, you know. So back then I was too shy to actually start talking about anything more than a kiss. So I resorted to this kind of old, you know, 1930s style thing where, you know, they kiss and then the screen goes blank.
Hitchcock moment when they go into the tunnel.
Yeah, you know, so it was, you know, that I was inhibited by that because I was frightened of the sort of feminist terror if I started talking about women's legs or something like that, you know. Anyway, and then so these, you know, these things are not entirely new, and I think one of the reasons that I got into this thing of writing very sexually explicit stuff in Paris Trance and Geoff in Venice was precisely because I'd been so self-inhibiting in those earlier books.
In that earlier anti-censoring.
Yeah. So it was, and I could tell you a bit more about that. I mean, the liberation for me came when I read those gay novels of Alan Hollinghurst, you know, where he's writing in this very classical prose, you know, very classical, and then without any change of gear or tone, it's like his cock was in my mouth, you know.
And that appealed to your creative sensibility.
I thought, well, that's if he can do it in this homosexual way, let's see if I can do it in the heterosexual way. And yeah, I really did.
Yeah, Welbeck's, the intermingling of the high intellectual and the utterly base and frankly, you know, disgusting smart is some of the most joyous reading.
It is joyous, and it's very, I mean, some of the stuff in, which one is it? Is it Atomized? Yeah. It's just so screamingly funny.
It's fantastic. And also because, again, I would say Welbeck is someone who is very much putting himself into these characters. Many of the men of Welbeck are absolutely Welbeck. When you look at him, you can see all of those sex tourists in Lanzarote.
Indeed,
and that's a wonderful level of fragility.
Yes, indeed.
In a way.
And, the guy in Atomized has this total crack up after that incredible scene with the young Muslim pupil in the school. But when you just said, when you look at Michel Welbeck, well, that's something I prefer not to do these days. I mean, my God,
whatever floats your boat.
What a wretch he looks like now.
I'll have you, Michelle, if you're ever interested.
He looks, anyway, yeah.
Okay, before we leave, I will just ask you one more thing, and then we'll go to a break before a Q&A. Burning Man, the festival is happening as we speak. I don't think the man has been burnt yet. I think it's a couple of days yet before that happens. You've written for UnHerd about Burning Man, and you've been 5-6 times?
Yeah.
And over the years, and you've seen it change and what it represents. Burning Man is a festival just outside of San Francisco, a very famous kind of, how would you describe it, a hippie festival?
No. What was the first word I used to you? Bollocks, that's right. Yeah, that again. No, it's definitely not, no.
How would you describe Burning Man?
Oh, big old sort of, but it's, I suppose, okay, oh God, I shouldn't be so rude to you, Flo. I mean, there's a few hippie, there's a
couple of people who are hippie
I guess you can see it comes out of those happenings and be-ins that were going on in the 60s. Yeah, it's a sort of festival. The key thing that is nothing's for sale there, and you know, it's all about participation. But yeah, I went, I think, first of all in 1999, and then I converted to it. I became this evangelist. Then I stopped going in 2005 because that phase of my life was over. Then I went again in, I think it was 2018, just because my friend was making a film there, and I'm such a lowlife, when he said he'd buy me a ticket and fly me into the festival on a charter flight. I thought, great, I'll go. No, it was really so unburning. What was even more, when he was discussing the logistics, I was saying to him, well, when you're talking to the organisers, don't use the word resort, but try to get us the most resort-like experience that you can.
Right.
Anyway, so I went again after all that time, and I really wasn't in that world anymore. And, you know, you'd meet people who were saying, oh, it's too big now, it's too commercial, all this sort of stuff. And I mean, for me, my experience in 2018 is that it was better than ever. It was so amazing, and the quality of, you know, I mean, the art is so utterly fantastic, and I knew after that, which I only went to as a bonus, I knew I would never ever go again, partly because I can't cope with just the physical hardship of it. So, as I said to my friend, if we ever go again, I only want to go to an endowed camp.
You want the full resort. They have to say resort the next
I mean, exactly the experience that they don't want you to have, because it's so physically punishing, and you know, I ain't getting any younger, so yeah.
To kick us off, before I take any questions in the room, I will take a question from our very own Julian, which I thought was particularly interesting, that he just told me he was fascinated to find out what you thought, which is, Julian wonders what you think of novels that take contemporary forms of communication. So that would include texts and emails, Twitter and WhatsApp. You're obviously a fan of reading letters, but what do you think of those more up-to-date versions of using communication?
Oh, I guess it's great if you can do it well, but it was really embarrassing in Yellow Dog when Martin Amis tried to do it, I thought, because I felt he hadn't quite, you know, he's a man of a certain age and he hadn't quite got the hang of it.
Right, so maybe best.
So I guess it's, yeah, so what's that Patricia Lockwood book? I thought did that very, very cleverly.
Yeah.
Everybody's
talking about this.
Yeah.
So if it's good, it's good, and if it's bad,
yeah. But I don't know. Does your heart always sink when you go into a different font in a book? Mine does.
Mine does.
Yeah.
I mean, David Baddiel's new book has a number of Twitter exchanges in which he has simply screenshotted the Twitter exchange and put it in the book, which I think is particularly lazy, to not even copy and paste it. But hey, personal preference, I guess. Okay, a question from inside the room. Julian will come round with a microphone. We've got Tom Hodgkinson, editor of The Idler, just over there.
What, Tom is asking a question?
Yes, I know. Careful, everyone.
Uh-oh.
Geoff, do you...
Well...
Geoff, you used to play tennis. Do you still play tennis? If you don't play tennis, is there any other sort of physical exercise that you do?
No, I'm thoroughly retired from the realm of the physical.
No tennis at all?
No, I can't. It's no, I've retired from tennis.
I used to play tennis with Tom, and my very favourite line of his was, one time he hit the ball and said, if that had gone over the net, that would have been an incredible shot.
Oh, how encouraging of him.
I think is a really good way to see life.
How nice to be, Anyway.
There was exercise at all that you covered?
Oh, very funny, Tom. Tom is trying to embarrass me, and I'm not to be embarrassed. Let's have another question.
Another question from inside the room. Yes, just over here.
Hi there. Your books are always sort of full of things you enjoy. I find music and art and things. Have you got any musical recommendations at the moment? What are you listening to? So you're Like Stars of the Lid and things
I want to reassure the rest of the audience. This isn't like something where the magician, you know, has a plant in the audience.
We've just paid him 50 quid, but that's not the same.
Oh yeah, I mean these are such great. So there's loads of stuff I'm crazy about at the moment. And so some things my favourite album of, was it last year or the year before, would be Oren and Barch's Ghosted. So I guess it's this, the music I like listening to now, I don't even know what it is. It's sort of improvised, it's very deep, it's got a deep groove, sort of psychedelic qualities and sort of long form typically. So I'll just roll out the names. So Oren and Barchi I love. That outfit called Natural Information Society, and an outfit, two people, it's called $75 Bill. And of course, there's the eagerly awaited new album from The Next, due in a couple of months. And all of these bands, or whatever you want to call them, they all seem to play at Cafe Otto. So it's that kind of stuff I'm listening to now. And what I'm struck by is the way that, these are really hard times for musicians. I mean, what I keep hearing is that, with Spotify and everything, if you manage to rack up however many, plays or whatever you call it on Spotify, then you can treat yourself to a vegan hamburger, But I mean, I think what that's done in a way, it sort of facilitated this thing with musicians collaborating, doing things, and because there's sort of no commercial point to it at all, then that's really liberated people to do stuff which is appealing precisely because it has such such a limited audience for it. And I'm struck by the way that, so I listen to this stuff quite a lot, and this is true what I'm going to say, I've never consciously heard a Taylor Swift song. I might have been in a shop while one was playing, but I'm not aware of it. Whereas all of this sort of stuff that manages to generate very little revenue, I have been very immersed in, and it's just really exciting, yeah. So yeah, that's what and then the other great thing for me in recent years was my belatedly getting into that hill country blues exemplified by Junior Kimbrough and R.L. Burnside, who of course nobody sort of knew what they were up to until very late in their lives when they gained a big audience. So it's just been fabulous. It's just a great time for music, I think, at the moment. Yeah.
Hi, Geoff.
Hi.
So you spoke, or you touched upon earlier tonight, and you've written in the past and spoken about in the past, the period in your 20s when you were living on the dole in Brixton, and how for you that was very important in your own creative process because you had not only the time but also the ability to read and to write and be creative, and you say it's instrumental for a lot of artists and writers during that period. My question to you is, what advice would you have for a young writer in the contemporary age who doesn't have the privilege of that sort of generous welfare state, and who is in fact sort of being squeezed on both sides?
Sure, yeah.
Having to work a job that saps your time,
Yeah.
pay £25 for a round of drinks. So what would your advice for a young writer be?
Well, it's
Asking for a friend.
tricky. There's several. It's a really good question, and I would say that it's the situation we're in now really works to the detriment of a city, London. So the way that there is, and it sort of blights the whole city. The lack of sort of, the other thing that was happening at that time in the 1980s, lots of buildings in London were still sort of, they hadn't been turned into branded leisure outlets or media startups or whatever. So there was a whole, so that's a shame. And then, I don't know how you go about it. What I am struck by in America is that these kids who are lucky enough to get on these MFA programs, which is very difficult to do. I say lucky enough, talented enough, but when I've been teaching on these programs, I've been really aware that these people in their 20s up to 30 or something, they are having exactly the kind of life I was having in my 20s, but it's funded by universities. And it's just wonderful, that phase of your life. And my God, it's just yet another kind of, unfortunately, all I can do is sit here like Keir Starmer and say, oh my God, it's terrible. And I don't know what's to be done about it. One aspect of that, I feel that particularly for writers. It's funny, I don't feel so bad about this state of the visual arts, but precisely because when the visual arts has become such art, what is it? In some ways, it's become the kind of art now. It's become so much art is changing hands at such a high price. It's become the sort of weird thing, the sort of last refuge of the Philistine art, I think, in a way. All these hedge fund managers buying stuff, all this kind of thing. So unfortunately, I just, I'm looking at you, and you look so young to me, and I'm just, I would fall prey to this great sort of nostalgia for la belle époque of living on the dole.
Mm. If you're filling in an Arts Council application form these days as well, you have to, which is maybe why it's skewed more towards visual art, is you have to prove that there's a public good to what you're doing, which is very easy to prove if you're doing a public sculpture or a mural, but very hard to prove if you're doing a long novel about D.H. Lawrence.
Yeah.
How could a young writer prove a public value to their work?
Well, I wouldn't even want. The great thing about I would go for the sort of I like the sort of model of the Dostoevsky kind of thing, where it doesn't. I'm not concerned about the public value. I think the value is for the person sort of doing it, really. I don't know. I guess the other thing that I'm conscious of in America is that it's a real full-time job and a skill applying for all this money that's available. I know several people, there's a system there to be worked. There's fabulous amounts of money. I say that as somebody who's never been a successful applier for things. And it's very different here, of course, because there's so little money to be, to be had. Anyway, I suppose all I'm saying is my heart goes out to you. And,
Let's take another question. Thanks, Julian.
Yeah, hello. I was just reading up a bit about you before I came here. I think one of the critics said you had a sort of magpie approach to your choice of subjects. But I just wondered what led you to write a book about Where Eagles Dare, which is one of my favourite old films.
Well, of course, we're men of a certain age.
Oh,
I've seen it many, many times. And I'll just say about that, so I wrote this book about a film that I loved so much, Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky. And, in that book I just summarised the film. Anyway, so that was that. And then I just liked the kind of way that I thought I'd written a little bit about Where Eagles Dare, which really meant a lot to me in a particular way that quite often films from one's childhood, or one's adolescence, let's say, for which one has a fondness, you start watching them on TV and then you realise that it's a sort of lie, they're rubbish. So, The Italian Job is a film that's deep in my heart, but it's just a stupid caper. The extraordinary thing about Where Eagles Dare is that even in late middle age, it was still exerting its power on me. And so I thought it merited, my love for it is genuine. But I got to admit, I did like the way that this balancing of, on the one hand, this, the highest kind of, the peak of serious art cinema being counterposed by this, ridiculous blockbuster, so that's why.
Do you watch contemporary blockbusters at all?
No. In fact, I have to be very careful going to the cinema because, you go to the cinema at whatever time it says, and then you're exposed to all these trailers, and you're just pulverized into a state of just complete moronic something before the film you've even come to see has started. So no, not blockbusters, but that's not to say that. The other day we went to see that. Well, we did this thing of, we've been, during the Olympics. Of course, we didn't go out at all, but all the time I was aware that the new Nuri Bilge Ceylan, or however you pronounce his name, that film about dry grasses was on. 3.25 hours. Pretty much beyond the limit of my endurance. But we did go to a cinema with very comfy seats, and it's I mention this because it is still on, it's still just about seeable. It's such an utter masterpiece, and it's not true to say it's not a moment too long, but there's it relatively speaking, it sort of flies by.
There's a certain joy as well. I don't know if you've had this feeling of being in something you're really enjoying and really hoping it ends. And it's
of course.
kind of a strange feeling. I get this when I see jazz, particularly, or when I go to a long film, where in the last 20 minutes, when you get a sense it's ending.
Yeah, I hate the false end.
You're almost halfway home mentally.
Yeah, but this is, this really, it's so great. Yeah, so I really urge. Have other people here seen it? Oh, okay, great. Well, there'll be a peak in sales at in its final
A real
weeks.
boost.
Yeah.
Another question, Julian. Thank you.
Yes.
One behind you, Julian, at the back.
Hi, Geoff. I recently read your book, Out of Sheer Rage, and I found this scene of you going to a talk in Austria, I think perhaps quite similar to this one, and you were quite ill there and had, I believe, a nosebleed.
Yeah.
Did you have any other... Can you talk us through your day-to-day in preparation for this talk, and did you have any other similar afflictions?
Well, this was, I knew this was going to be a conversation thing, and I'd say something about that. It was actually a lecture in Copenhagen, and I think I make the joke that, I was hopelessly unprepared, but, that it was all invented, it's all made up, that thing. I always prepare very thoroughly. I've got this memoir coming out next year about my life up to the age of 18. And, I passed the 11 plus, went to grammar school. It's sort of, this book could even be called a grammar school boy, so it's actually called homework, and I do always do my homework. So I'm always, that was just sort of, that was invented, yeah. This didn't require too much preparation because I am, without question, the world's leading authority on my own work. Yeah.
There's a kind of studied chaos there, though, perhaps, that goes a bit deeper into the rest of your work as well, that so often in these events someone will say to you, well, this work is genre-defying, or how do you possibly come up with this combination of strange, unrelated actors and then put them into one text? But in the Federer book, there was a very particular set of structures that you were using that were very much thought through. Is that a kind of art in itself, to make something appear anarchic and chaotic when it's in fact incredibly measured and studied?
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, Flo, because although if I'm giving a lecture, let's say, then I'm scrupulously prepared. I mean, the books, I never know how they're going to turn out, and I may have said this on other occasions, but I never do proposals. I don't present a proposal to sell a book to a publisher, partly because I'm very, for all sorts of reasons, I don't do that. And then part of the fun for me is just finding how the book will generate its own form, and then at a certain point I realize, there is a form which will be appropriate. But if I'd written a proposal which would say what the book was going to do, and then that would just kill it for me.
It requires a certain amount of anarchy there in the making.
Well, I don't know. I know on your poster that it said anarchy, and I remember being rather shocked by that.
This is trying to bring out your punk side.
Well, it's So I think it's not. I mean, if you'll allow me, I don't think it is anarchic, but it is. It's an improvised thing, and I like the idea that it does find a form. And I've really nothing bugs me more than when people say that some of these books, like the Federer book, are unstructured, because I feel they have a very careful structure, but it's not the kind of but they don't have chapters, Yeah, it's very like, I don't know if other people share my fondness for that Australian trio, The Next, but in the same way that their sort of pieces evolve.
They're just like one long hour or
Yeah,
a long piece with chapters.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't want to name drop, but last week I had dinner with the drummer of The Next, Tony Buck, and I was joking to him saying they've really sold out, their new album, their latest albums, they're just these short tracks of just 20 minutes each.
Philistines, absolute Philistines. Well, it's a shame about The Next, but I'm happy that you're able to continue that venerable tradition.
Yeah, I'm always interested to hear what inspires people, and definitely +1 for Stars of the Lid and The Next. So it's really interesting to hear that you find those acts interesting. But I'm just as interested in what people hate.
Oh,
so I'd like to explore further your revulsion for Bruce Chatwin. I don't have particularly strong opinions myself, but I get persuaded. And who else do you think is doing stuff that's just reprehensible?
What a great topic. I mean, we can come back to Nietzsche again, who's a line of his where he says the great venerators are also the great despisers. So I really think that a condition of my loving so many things is that I really hate other things. And with Bruce Chatwin, I think it's just so often it was particularly in the song lines that I felt it was his tone I didn't like, and the way that do you remember in that book he'll keep meeting, so he's in Australia of course, and then he'll meet these people and then he'll just sort of put them down, and there's a particular kind of English tone in that I really didn't like. And then I thought his big idea, everyone's talking about the ideas in Bruce Chatwin, and I wasn't really persuaded by them when he was, this big thing, the origins of human rootlessness, but then, God, what about the human urge to stay put? And then I did have a friend in Paris who also had a low opinion of Chatwin, and he said that, he didn't know anything about rootlessness. He said, could he come and stay with them for 3 weeks? And he stayed for 3 months, which I thought was a kind of thing. But it's so often with these things, it's just a tone that I took against, actually. And I should say also, I did have a great admiration for his book On the Black Hill, one of his more sort of a straightforward novel. Other things that I can't bear. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I can't. My mind has gone blank. But I think it was the week before last. My wife, we'd only been up a little while, and she said, "Oh God, why do you have to start railing against the world so early in the day?" So there is plenty. I think it's the Today programme that gets me railing against the world so often. Yeah. Anyway, so before the end of the evening, something else will float into my head. But
Okay. Final question before I liberate you to dinner and we continue this downstairs in the bar and drinking.
Yeah. Hooray.
Is what fascinates you so much about the end or the final chapters of people's careers, whether that's their sporting career, musical career, their literary career. You focus often on what might be consciously or unconsciously those kind of final moments of greatness. Why do those attract you?
Well, they only for that one book, I think, that was of interest to me. And it was partly because for a long time, I thought I'd like to write something about Turner's late works and Beethoven's late works. And then I guess it was, because even though I haven't changed physically since my first novel came out in 1989, I was conscious that, I wasn't, that I was nearer the end of my, I was in my sort of, I was about 63 when I started writing that book. So it was about the right time to do it. I guess the serious point, this is a point I've made before, but there's been a lot of discussion of late style. It's almost become a cliche, actually. But I was kind of interested in the way that last things and late things are not always the same, i.e. that sometimes somebody's last works come not during their late phase, as was the case with Beethoven and Turner. Somebody's last works might come in what would have been, in Beethoven's case, his middle phase. You know, so that would apply to, say, Coltrane. You know, I was having this discussion with Tony Buck, my dear friend Tony Buck. He was saying he loves late Coltrane. He loves interstellar space. So, you know, I'm always interested when musicians say something. And so so, I mean, God, on the way home from having dinner with him, I listened to Interstellar Space for about 5 minutes. You know, I can't, you know. Anyway, that seems Coltrane's last works, irrespective of what I make of them, they're clearly transitional works. Same with that photographer, Gary Winogrand. You know, suddenly these people get ill and stop. And then also we can think of all sorts of people whose last works come up right at the beginning. You know, those writers who write just one novel and stop, or, you know, yeah. So
like Florence would have carried on had their lives not been
cut. I mean, well, the Lawrence thing is so incredible, though, because Lawrence dies at, what is it, 44? Yeah, you know, my God, he'd written so much. Wow. I mean, I don't know what Lawrence had left, really, but, you know, and then, I mean, Lawrence is an interesting case of somebody who really, those last works of Lawrence, those late works of Lawrence, he's really summing up everything, you know. He's really sort of coming to the end, and those poems are those last poems, The Ship of Death, oh my God, I mean, there's a real sense of somebody making a testament there, yeah.
Writing a memoir, has that put you into a reflective mood? I mean, your work all seems to have a degree of reflection about your own life, but a memoir must put that into a kind of high gear.
Oh, it does, yeah, and it's had a real effect. So this is a memoir, it's just from the time I was born, 1958, and it stops at the age of 18. And it's a funny book to have written in a way, because when I'm reading biographies, I just hate the stuff about people's childhood. I skim through it, and now there's this 300 pages of my... I suppose you could say that they're often the most interesting bits of autobiographies, but they're always the most boring bits of biographies. Mm-hmm. So that's the redeeming quality.
Oh, it reminds me of Tristram Shandy, though, where the best parts of Tristram Shandy, of course, are the parts in the womb.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing about being in the womb in this book, but yeah, it has had an effect on me, really. And it took me my wife was always urging me to write this, because she knew my mum and dad, and so it's this story of. So yeah, 1958 to 1976, and it's all about me and my life. But, you know, who cares about that? Well, obviously I do, but I really do believe that it contains a larger social history. And I haven't read that book. I mean, it doesn't. No, but I think what it is, in a way, it's going back to the young guy's question over there. This kind of. You know, it's a vanished England. So it's a book about England, really, and this wonderful to be as I was, this fortunate recipient of this abundance of the welfare state. Not the welfare state in the sense of just giving handouts, but this kind of thing where it was such a, you know, it was just such a supportive and encouraging environment. And as we all hear in the papers the whole time, you know, there is less social mobility than there was back then. So it's about me just being this sort of beneficiary of a particular historical moment, really, and very consciously treading in the footsteps of those people who articulated the process that I went through. I mean, Lawrence is a sort of forerunner for it, and then, you know, crucially, you know, it's a trodden path, this, you know. I mean, so it's deeply indebted to Raymond Williams, and I'm treading in the footsteps of Tony Harrison and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. Anyway, so it's spoiler alert. The climax of the book comes with me getting 3 grade A levels. Yeah.
The real anti-hero that we all dreamed of. Geoff Dyer, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Flo, thank you so much. You're really great at this. Yeah.